Interesting. Yeah. So I didn't forget that. And the pickup pipe is actually fine. It's just a little bit crusty, but there's no holes in it. Okay. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to our new member of the team, Juliana the Crane. And when she's not fighting interdimensional Nazis and putting Chief Inspector Kido on the road to redemption, she's in here lifting big old heavy A-series engines with me. So welcome, Juliana. In the last video we went through pretty much every possible aspect of the oil circuit to find out why the rebuilt engine wasn't creating any oil pressure. Okay, it was creating a bit, but it would quickly go down to zero once the oil had warmed up. I traced it down to the main bearings, so without taking the engine apart we kind of went through everything, and it ended up with me blowing down a pipe into where the oil filter is meant to be, and that blows air directly into the main bearings. And in theory I shouldn't be able to blow down there. It should just be, the clearance should be that tight that I can't physically blow through it. But it was quite easy to blow through, and it made a load of skibbity toilet kind of noises. So that basically said that I've got a massive leak at the main bearings, and the most obvious reason for that is that the clearance is just too much between the shell of the bearing and the crankshaft that sits in there. I've taken it all apart with Juliana's help, and I did a plastic gauge test on the main bearings. The clearance was so large it didn't even register on the plastic gauge. So, in case you don't know, because I didn't until I looked this up, this is plastic gauge, and it's basically a very thin string of wax that's to a certain size, and you put that between things that are meant to have tight clearances, squash them together, and it squashes the string. And then you have a gauge that shows you how wide it is after you've squashed it, and that tells you your clearance. So for an A-series engine, this amount of squashing means you're at the minimum permissible clearance, and this level of squashing down here means you're at the maximum. So if you're kind of below the minimum, you're not going to have enough clearance between the shell and the crank, and you're going to get friction and your engine's going to grenade itself. If you have too much clearance and there's too big a gap, you're not going to have enough oil pressure and you're going to get friction and the engine will grenade itself. So everyone talks about A-series engines, like it's a big joke with the clearances, and yeah, you can get away with a lot. But actually, to get the clearance of the crankshaft is quite difficult. You have to be pretty accurate with it. Why is the clearance so big? Well, I've measured the crank, and the machine shop claimed to have machined it down 20,000th of an inch, and they have done. So I've measured that with a micrometer, one of the really accurate ones, not the kind of garbage you get for £5 off eBay, and it is well in spec. So they did a perfect job, there's no issue there. I looked at the shells that I ordered, and they were all 20 thou oversize. So I ordered the correct shells. So why is the clearance so big that it doesn't even register on the plastic gauge? The shell sits in one of these, like that, and that's all you can see. But when you take it out and look at the back side, and this is something an experienced engine builder will know, is that on the back here is stamped whether it's a standard size shell or an oversize. So it doesn't matter what it says on your invoice, it doesn't matter what it says on the box. If it says oversize 20 on the box, like it did in my case, but it says STD for standard on the back, it means it's a standard size shell, and you will have over 20 thousandths of an inch more clearance than you should have, which means you'll get exactly what I found. There's no pressure. So that was the problem. Amazing. So at some point someone would have put these in the factory or distribution centre, standard size shells in a 20 oversized box, and eventually they found their way to me. I mean, I remember looking at these. These are the ones that go on the cranks, on the big ends, and they are plus 20. And I remember looking and seeing, oh yeah, 020, that makes sense. But maybe I just didn't look at these and noticed that they're standard shells, so f*** it. Anyway, I've ordered all new shells. I know that the big end journals weren't that worn, but with that crank probably rattling around a lot in there. Someone in the last video, or the video before, commented that it sounded like a bag of spanners at some point. That's also why it sounded like a bag of spanners. In this video, I'm going to install the new shells, check everything once again with the Plastigauge, put it all back together and hopefully run it. New bearings just arrived. Overnight delivery from the UK. I can't remember the last time that ever happened. And they are indeed, they're not stamped very clearly, but you can definitely see it's 02 and just about another 0. So they are the correct size. Nonetheless, the next step is to do a clearance test with the Plastigauge to be sure. So to do the Plastigauge test, you need to dry fit it, so make sure everything's clean and there's no lubricant on there, which means we have to be, I guess you have to be really careful not to turn the crank accidentally and scratch it. If there's any lubrication, you'll get a false reading because the lube it also has a bit of a thickness to it. And just get the pistons out of the way without pushing them through and popping the rings out. Again, I did that off camera. It was a bit annoying how to get the ring compressor out again. Nothing like an unexpected compression of the ring. So make sure I don't foul it either. Okay, so that is in, but I'm not going to turn it. Just make sure it's not fouling the big ends. Kind of is here. There we go, that's better. Yeah. It's all free, just about. Press that in as well. I think you have to handle it quite carefully as well, so you don't pinch it. And drop it on there. So that's the Plastigauge right now, and then we just squish it and see how wide it is. The torque on these bolts is kind of redonkulous, so you might have to excuse some grunting from me, but we'll do each one up gradually so we don't yeet it over to one side. Ooh. Kind of weird. It has squashed, but it's gone in some kind of weird pattern. But I think we can just take the width there, the bigger blob, which is looking like kind of between that one and that one. So it's pretty much right in the middle of the minimum and maximum range. And that is exactly what you need to get oil pressure. So that is a win. We can also measure it off the cap. See, there's like a dark ring around there. I think that's the actual width. And again, it's pretty much in the middle of the range. Perfect. Obviously you're going to want to erase all trace of that before going any further. I'll give this a blast with compressed air before I install it, but I'm just definitely going to make sure I've got rid of all of that in case I forget. Doesn't half leave a mess, and if that's in your bearings, I don't think it's going to help anything. Nice to get a good result, and look at that. Just by putting the shells back in, we've already started rebuilding this thing. Now, to put this lot together, I'm going to need some gaskets. And for some reason I've got an embarrassment of A-series gaskets in here, and out of all that lot I've managed to put together almost a complete set of the gaskets I need, except for the drop gear housing gasket. And my supplier of choice in Poland is out of stock of those as well. So rather than pay 25 quid to have something couriered from the UK, I'm just going to make my own. So now the caps are all on the bearings and the big ends. Everything's all torqued up, went together very nicely. Checked it every step of the way to make sure it spins nice and easily, which it does. I think last time it was a bit stiffer than this. Might have just been because it was winter and colder, so the build loop was a bit thicker. But I don't know, this just feels... everything feels better this time around. So the next job is to flip it the right way up and then reunite it with the gearbox. And for that, we will need Juliana the crane. Not exactly by the book, and you wouldn't want to lift it into the car like that. But I just need it to be this height so I can get the gaskets on the gearbox, slide it underneath, and hopefully just drop it nicely in position. Wow, every time I think I've got the hang of something or I found a super safe, efficient way of doing things, it turns into the biggest Hail Mary ever. But there we are. She's back where she belongs, on top of the gearbox. So I just need to bolt that together now and let the gasket set. Nice though. Not bad for an evening's work. And thank you, Juliana, as well, for your patience and just kind of completely filling the room with your, I don't know, enormous girth or whatever. No offence. Timing plate is on, so I'm ready to fit the timing gear. And that's the timing gear on. This is a non-stretch duplex timing chain with vernier adjustment. So normally you just kind of put these onto the two dots align, but apparently they're never that aligned, and as soon as you run the engine, the chain will stretch after a few hundred miles, and then your cam timing is completely off. So these, they don't stretch. You have got the dot to dot to get you kind of initially timed up, but then you've got these to make fine adjustments. And as you can see, the dots aren't exactly aligning, but yeah, the timing's all correct on this. I've checked it, and you can always adjust it again if you're not happy with the timing. So pretty good system. And that's the timing cover on, which is very simple apart from this bolt, which took me about half an hour and I had to fight for every single quarter turn, but that's okay. Next up is fit the primary gear on the crank and then put the drop gear housing on with this homemade gasket that I tried to film earlier but ran out of batteries. And there's the primary gear. If you're screaming at me about measuring the end float, I have measured the end float. I measured it last time, and I think taking things apart and putting them back together again after they haven't been used, it's not really going to affect the end float. There hasn't been any wear, and I'm using all the same thrust washers and things like that. And anyway, it's just an A series, it's going to be fine. And now the drop gear housing's on with my homemade gasket. Hopefully that'll hold. I got a good tip from the internet one day. Always put a bit of insulation tape around the primary gear, so when you put the drop gear housing on, you're not mangling the oil seal there. And there's the flywheel and clutch pack, looking very smart. I haven't torqued up the crank bolt yet or hammered over the locking tab, because when the head gasket arrives and I put the whole engine back together, I want to do a bench test to see if it'll build the oil pressure before it goes back in the car. Just better remember to tighten it up before it does go back in the car, eh? And that's the head and the beautiful rocker assembly installed. Everything torqued up in steps, gradually and purposefully up to the spec. I'm just a little bit stuck now because I wanted to fill it with oil and crank it on the deck to see if it'll build up oil pressure, but the oil hasn't arrived. It was meant to arrive today and it hasn't, so what can you do? And I have no idea what this is off. Wasn't there before I took the engine apart. There's always a bit left over when you do DIY. So let me explain this hot mess to you. First of all, before we put oil into it, these are where the drive shafts go, so if you fill it with oil, it's a shared lubrication system with the gearbox, so all the oil will just pour out of the drive shafts. So I've rigged up this totally spec pair of paint can lids and some rubber O-rings and a bit of metal banding and a pair of Lidl mole grips. Not little, but Lidl, because they're from Lidl. So I mean, it's probably going to leak from here, but I only need to have the oil in there for a few minutes. So I'm hoping that'll be enough that we don't have an environmental disaster on the floor. Put the fuel pump back in, because otherwise oil will come spurting out of there. This is the earth point going to the battery. We've got the oil filter that's filled with oil, The pipe is filled with oil. I have back primed the oil pump, so the oil pump has oil in it. Starter motor's attached. I've put a little bit of steel banding on there so I'm not blowing up my brass contactor. So I'll touch the red against the banding and that'll crank it. And I've got the pressure gauge. So what I'll do is I'll fill this up with oil just to the minimum, because like I say, it is going to leak. And then I'll set the camera up so that we can all have a look at the pressure gauge and see where it lands. Fingers crossed. Noise alert, this might be pretty loud, so if you've got headphones on, turn them down. Okay, here we go. $60, just about 60, that'll do me. One more for luck? I think so. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. Now I need to drain the oil out before it starts. Wow. It's just started to drip. Okay, let's get the oil out. Okay. I feel like I worked for that result. Pigeon agrees with me too. So I think we're good. I'm going to have a cup of tea, tidy up, and tomorrow start reinstalling the engine. Yeah, I'm not going to touch this without having a cup of tea first. So the engine's in, most of the ancillaries are installed, but there's still work to do. I need to put the drive shafts in and put the gear selector on. So there's a couple of things to do underneath, and that's why she's up on the quick jack. Greetings comrades, it's now May the 1st, Workers' Day.
The vote was massively in favour of an instant walkout. There have been dire warnings that another stoppage could spell the end of BL.
And Agnetha's been working hard. I didn't film this because there was a lot going on, but I did start it. It went to 58 psi, and then I did the part of the first start where you run it up to about 2,000 or 3,000 RPM and leave it for 10 minutes. It's quite a hot day, so as soon as I switched it off, the coolant went everywhere once the fan turned off. And it looks like we've got a bit of a head gasket issue, but the head gasket needs to be retorqued anyway. Fundamentally, she started, she ran, she sat there for 10 minutes in the baking sun getting very hot at 3000 RPM without one single complaint. It sounds good, but I was going to restart it and then show you how it works, but given the state of the coolant, I think I'll just tidy this up, retorque the head, do all the other adjustments and leave it for another day. But fundamentally that problem is solved. Whatever's going on with the head gasket can also be solved without taking the entire engine out. There's a bit of her green blood spilt here, but that's okay. I'm very impressed with that. I did get a bit of footage on my phone, so I'll just insert that now. Good morning, happy workers' day. Here we are, 58 psi, temperature right in the red, and it sounds like a sewing machine with a couple of bolts loose, but that's okay. Very happy. And I think that's more than enough for this video, so thanks very much for watching. Thanks to the new subscribers. Every time I don't do a video I get 2 new subscribers, so I'm going to not do videos more often, and see you in the next one. Hopefully we'll go for a drive somewhere.